guys, I'm so excited. Today I am talking to you from my couch because this is where I usually do all of my reading, and today I want to go over all the books I read on my Kindle in 2023. Now, 2023 was the first year that I had my Kindle for the whole year. Ken bought me this Kindle at the end of 2022 in December for my birthday, and I was just so excited to get back into reading. I have always loved reading, and being able to, go on Kindle Unlimited and look through different books was just so exciting for me. So the start of the year in January, I actually started with my first book was Covet. Now, Covet is book 3 in a 6-book series. The first book is Crave, and the second book is Crush. And when I started my reading journey in December, I read both of those books before I started with the third one. Now, kind of just to catch you up, the first 2 books follows a girl named Grace whose parents die, and she's forced to move to Alaska to live with her uncle and her cousin. And there's just a lot of things that happen in the first 2 books that are just so crazy. And then it leads into the third one. So when you actually look at the books, you wouldn't even realize that they're like a series because they're so, like, the titles are different. You would think they're like individual, but they're definitely a series. And by the time you get to the third one, you kind of, spoilers here, is that you learn that Grace's real mate in the book is Hudson, which is her boyfriend at the time, Jax's brother. So she kind of has this like love triangle between the 2 brothers, where her bond with Jax has been broken, and then her soul bond kind of with Hudson becomes like part of her story. And through this book, you are kind of rooting for Jax, but then you kind of like Hudson because he's so sweet. And there's just so much that goes into this book. Like, she can't remember the time her and Hudson spent together, and then they're about to go to jail, and they're just on the search for things, and there's just so much that's going on, and you just feel so bad for Jax. But it was such a good book, and I loved this series so much. This is actually the first series I got into, and it was one that I just adored. Now, of course, the next book I got into was the 4th one in the series, called Court. And in this book, you kind of are following Grace's journey into finding about more of who she is and who she's supposed to become. And the love story between her and Hudson starts to grow. And again, this book is just full of journeys, and I cried reading this book because at the very end there's just heartbreaking stuff that happens, but it is just jam-packed with the love story and journeys and life decisions. And again, this was a series I couldn't put down. It was just so good that I just couldn't wait to read the next book. And if you're looking for a good supernatural type of series, this would definitely be a series to read. Now, I took a break from that series because I kind of wanted to read something else in between. So the third book I read of the year was Eat, Pray, #FML by Gabriella Stone. And this book is just so amazing and so raw. Just the experiences that she shares with you and her journey, mentally. And it was just very eye-opening, and I absolutely loved it. It's a story about her real life and the things that happened to her. And a little spoiler is that she falls in love with a guy, and then the guy breaks up with her right before this big trip they're supposed to take together. And then she decides just to take this trip by herself and go on this journey. And it was just so amazing. I was so excited to read it. I love Gabriella for, opening up and sharing her story, and this is a definitely need to read book. So of course I had to go back to my series, and I started to read book number 5 of my 6-book series. It is Charm. And this book was one of my favorites in the series. It made me smile. It made me cry. The love story between her and Hudson was just so amazing. The bond they have together. A little spoiler is in the second one. She turns to rock for 2 months. And then when you come back, you figure out like why she was like that. But during those 2 months, she doesn't have any memory of what happened. And this is the story of the memories between her and Hudson while she was in a rock form for 2 months. It's the book you were just waiting for to read. And I am telling you, it was just amazing, and I absolutely loved it, and it made you fall even more in love with her and Hudson, and definitely fall more in love with Hudson and see how sweet he is and loving he is and caring he is and how he just wants the best for Grace, and it is amazing. Now, when I finished the last book, I didn't realize there was actually another book to eat, pray, #FML, and there was. It was called The Ridiculous Misadventures of a Single Girl, again by Gabrielle Stone. When you finish the first book, it kind of leaves you on like, well, what happens after that? And this is the book that happens after that. I was so excited about being able to read this and being able to catch up with her after her like adventure during the first one. So after you read the first one, definitely read the second one because it is a continuation of what happens after, you know, she gets back home from traveling and just all the emotions and everything with it. Again, love her for being so raw and open about her emotions and her feelings, and it is just an amazing read for anybody, you know, going through something mentally like breakups and feelings. Like, this is the book for you. Now, because I like self-help books, the next book I read was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F Word. I don't want to say it just in case you have kids in the background, but this was just a self-help book that I kind of just wanted to read and see what it was about. I really liked it, so if you're looking for a self-help book, this could be one for you. I went back and forth from like reading, you know, books to reading like self-help books and stuff like that, and this one for me was a good read, and it was something that I enjoyed, and if you think you might enjoy it, give it a read. Now, the next one I read because me and my brother were discussing Ryan Holiday, and he is someone who like talks about ego and obstacles and has his own YouTube channel, and my brother was talking and discussing to me about his book. So one of the books I read was Stillness is the Key, and this book was so insightful of like behind famous people's lives and things that like I didn't even know, like about presidents and Tiger Woods and just stuff like that, and stuff that they went through in their life and the things that they had to overcome and conquer. And this one I was pretty surprised, but it was definitely a good read. And I was very, like I said, surprised at the end that it was so interesting. He has more books and I haven't read more of them, so maybe this year I'll dive into other ones. But really, it was a very good read, and I was excited that my brother reached out and we actually read this together, and we would call and have conversations about it. So it was just so interesting and so good. The next book I read is one that I think a lot of people read last year, and that is Things We Never Get Over by Lucy Score. This is the first book of 3 different books. They all kind of go together, but they're all separate. And the first book follows Knox and Naomi. Naomi comes into a small town coming to deal with her twin sister, and she runs into Knox, who's this like kind of like you would get like a big muscular like bartender biker dude, and they kind of bump heads. But then over their time of spending time together, it's kind of like a love story that you never saw coming. Also, I do have to warn with Lucy Score books is that they are kind of smitten. So they are very like sexual. So if you're like uncomfortable with that, I would not read this. But if you're kind of okay with that, this was amazing. I absolutely loved the love story between them and how they grown and how she kind of like softens him along the way. It was very, very cute, and I absolutely loved it. So, of course, the next book after that is the second one, which is Things We Hide from the Light. The issue with this book is it follows his brother Nash and a girl named Lena, and really, I loved it, but it was almost a repeat of the first book, and I feel like a lot of people who read this one and then read the other one and then read this one, you kind of see how the stories are very, very similar. But overall, I really, really liked it. And I like that in these stories, they kind of talk about, you know, the characters from the book before. So it's kind of like bringing everything in. And then in the third book too, the characters in that book are also in these books. So it's really cool to kind of see the behind the scenes of like their stories going along in these stories. But like I said, it was kind of just a repeat, but it was good for, you know, the story as it is, but just pre-warn that it is just kind of like a repeating story. The next one I read was another self-help book. It was How to Do the Work, Recognizing Your Patterns, Healing from Your Past, and Creating Yourself. I really liked this book because it dove into the patterns of the things you go through and why you might be going through them and why these patterns keep popping up. And it teaches you to heal from your past experiences and really dive into yourself and what it means to be you. And I just thought it was really a good book to just read when you're trying to reconnect back with yourself. And I absolutely loved it. And again, I went from, you know, love stories and romance to just self-help because I just kept kind of jumping back and forth between the two. But this one was just really good for me. And obviously you're doing the work and you're putting the work in to, you know, work on yourself. And I really enjoyed that. So if you want a book to kind of open up to really working on yourself and going deep, like into a deep dive, this would definitely be the book for you. Now, when I tell you, I have not cried during a book so much like I did of Remembrance of Him. This book follows a girl named Kenna's journey from coming out of jail and then going back and trying to reconnect with her daughter. And it is one of the saddest stories I swear I've read, because when, spoiler alert here, when you start reading the book, you find out that the father of her child died, and you don't know why until later on in the book, but she starts becoming friendly with his best friend Ledger, and, you know, they start forming this bond, and by the end of the book, it just made me smile and warmed my heart so much for how it ended. But I'm telling you, if you want a tearjerker, this is a tearjerker. This is one of the books that I was just like so in, like deep diving in and couldn't wait to read the next chapter. Like seriously, so good. I definitely want to like read more Colin Hoover books, but this was the one that I first started with, and it was just an amazing book and very emotional and is definitely a good read. The next book I read was kind of a weird one for me, and I really didn't enjoy it. It was another self-help book. It was Self-Observation, The Awakening of Conscience on an Owner's Manual. It really wasn't one that I really enjoyed. It was really kind of just weird, and I read through all of it, but it wasn't like a self-help book that I was like, yep, I definitely would recommend that to other people. It was just too weird for me. And of course, then finally the book number 6 came out in, I think it was in March. I had to wait to read this last book, but it is Cherish. And when I tell you, I was so excited about diving back into my series. And this book brings you back into, the shadow world and what more into her and Hudson and, Grace discovering things, and then this big battle happens. And I'm not gonna lie, I cried when the series ended. I loved this whole journey of Grace, and then of Jax and all her friends, and of Hudson. And to be honest, I was so sad when this journey ended. I loved this book series so much. Loved it so much, and recommend it to anybody who's looking for a supernatural series to read. This one was just so good. And of course, because I love the series so much, Tracy Wolf actually made a book about like the insider guide of Catmere Academy. And I loved this because it dove into each character. It dove into relationships. It dove into things they liked, their favorite like class. It was amazing. This is definitely a good read to read after all the books, because like you learn stuff about characters that you wouldn't have known reading the book, or like things that like after you read it make more sense in the book. It was definitely a good read after reading the 6-book series. And then because I love Lucy Score so much, I went into her next series, which has 3 books, and it's Pretending to Be Mine. In Pretending to Be Mine, you are following Harper and Luke. And Harper is a girl who comes into town and pretends to be Luke's girlfriend to get his parents off his back, because they're like always asking him about when he's going to be in a relationship and all this stuff. And it's one of those stories where I cried a lot, but then by the end I was really happy, because like he struggles to like want to be in a relationship with her, but then slowly falls for her, and kind of like their love story, just like the way it falls into place is just amazing. And like I said, by the end I was like crying because of how it was leading, but then by the end of the book I was just so happy. Again, another kind of like smitten book where it's very like sexual and just like her other books, but this was definitely a good read and I absolutely loved it. And then of course I read her second book, which is Finally Mine. And this book follows Gloria and Aldo. And again, with her book series, you have it where she talks about like the characters from the last book you read and then the next book you read, which I absolutely love, because you see like again behind the scenes of things. But this story is just so cute. And in the first book you learn that Gloria is in an abusive relationship that she gets out of, and then in this book she's trying to kind of decide who she wants to be until she meets Aldo. And Aldo is a military man, and he and her kind of start like flirting and everything, but then he gets shipped off to like do, military stuff. And then he ends up, spoiler alert, losing his leg in like a bombing accident. And when he comes back, he's a different person, but over time Gloria like helps him find himself, and their love story is just so cute and so pure, of just like 2 people who have gone through stuff, who are trying to figure out their lives, but like want to figure it out together. Again, I cried during this book, but was so happy by the end because it is such a sweet love story. And then of course we got to the last book in the series, which was Protecting What's Mine, which follows Lincoln and Mackenzie. Lincoln is a firefighter, and Mackenzie, she's just a girl who doesn't want to settle down. She's all about her work, but then she meets Lincoln, and then she kind of starts changing her thoughts on what she actually wants, if she wants to continue in her profession and moving around, or if she wants to settle down with him. This story was just so cute, and I absolutely loved it. Like, again, seeing the previous characters coming into this book and being involved was just so cute. And I loved the 3-book series. I loved each of them on their own, but I loved the continuation of just all the characters, and again, just loved the books and loved the writing and loved all 3 separate love stories, but loved that they all kind of came together, and it was an amazing journey. And then next I got into another series that when I first saw the books, I was surprised on how good they were. And the first book in the series was Guardian. It follows an 18-year-old girl named Declana, I think. And she's fantasized with this boy, Alexander, who Alexander kind of isn't interested in any girl, but then he kind of becomes interested in her, and they kind of form this bond together. And there's stuff that you find out about him that she's not supposed to know, and it is just the cutest story ever, and everything just unfolds, and she finds these secrets out about him, and I just really loved it. And I loved the little love story between them two, and it was definitely an enjoyable read. Which then, of course, brings you into book number 2, which is Fallen. And Fallen is a continuation of the last book. From the last book, when you learn the things you learn, by the second book, you realize that the things that were holding them back, they don't have to hold back from anymore. And their love story just continues to grow, and it is just so amazing and so cute, and then it takes a turn where these, this enemy that is coming for both of them, this evil, is something they have to fight, and they have to figure out how to fight it together. And again, it was just so freaking cute, and I loved it, and I couldn't put it down again. Definitely a page turner till the end, and definitely one that I could not wait to read the next book. And then of course it brought me to book number 3, Revelations. When you think from the last book that the battle is over, no. The battle has just begun. This book, brings evil back to town, and it's an good versus evil, life or death situation. By the end of this book, I was in tears. I was crying so hard how this book ended, just because everything in the book and leading up to it, and the love story between these 2 characters was just so cute and so amazing, and the way they ended it was devastating. And I just was how can you come back from this? I'm telling you, it was one of those books where I was just so excited to read it, but so devastated when it ended. And of course, I couldn't wait to read the next one, which of course is Return. AJ Messenger, they really know how to get you, because the first 3 books was just crazy, and I couldn't wait to read Return. And Return was even crazier, because Return follows their daughter, but also follows them in a way. I don't want to spoil it by saying too much, I have on other things I've talked about for this book series, but I loved this book. I loved how it was written. I loved the story between the parents and the story about their daughter. it was just amazing, and how it ended was so heartfelt and so cute that it definitely like was a series that I didn't think I was going to fall in love with, but fell in love with, and I wouldn't mind reading again. It was just so cute from the first book to the last book, and if you're looking for a cute like love story, but like kind of like Love Conquers All story, these books are definitely it. And then I thought, let's switch it up and kind of go into like thrillers. And the first book I read was by Frida McFadden, and it was The Coworker. When I tell you, this book was like full of twists and turns that like I couldn't wait to like read the next chapters. Seriously, so good. It follows two women in an office that work close to each other, and then one terrible crime happens that just like can't be taken back, and it was a crazy, like I said, twist-turning book. It follows, Natalie, who's like this top sales girl and pretty and always gets what she wants, and then you follow Dawn, who's kind of quirky and weird, and you learn a lot of stuff about turtles that you wouldn't think you would learn. And this book is actually broken up into two parts, and the first part of the book was really, really good, and then the second part of the book was really, really weird. Like, the first part of the book was twists and turns and really interesting, and then by the time you get to the second part, it just kind of threw you off into this like weird place, and I didn't really enjoy the second half as much as I enjoyed the first one, but it was definitely worth a read and definitely good. By the end, you're just like, oh my gosh. But like I said, for the two parts, first part good, second part not so good, but overall definitely a good read. And then I read Rebecca Yarros's book, and it is the In the Likely Event, which follows Izzy and Nate. The start of this book is following these two people who meet on a plane, and then the plane crashes, and then their journey and their relationship afterwards, because Nate is in the army, so obviously their relationship kind of has to grow around him coming home from the army. And this book was so intense, and by the end of the book I kind of shed a few tears for the relationship because you're not entirely sure where it's going. But then by the very end of the book, I was just so happy for the two of them. And it is just a very crazy twist and turns type of book. But while reading the book, you kind of learn why they are the way they are with each other and how their relationship turned to be what it is. And it like, you discover things that like kind of tear you apart and make you sad, but then again by the end make you really, really happy for these two characters. So definitely was a good read, and definitely was a very interesting love story. And then let's go back into another thriller by Frida McFadden, and that is One by One. When I tell you this is a book that I could not put down, I stayed up late some nights just wanting to continuously leave chapter to chapter because there are so many twists and turns in this book. You're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It follows three couples who decide to go on this vacation together, and then one by one they are like picked off in some way. And I tried to figure this one out like while I was reading it, and then by the end I was so incredibly shocked that it just made me realize like how wrong I was. It was insanely crazy how this ended, and it was definitely an amazing read. And then of course the last one in the series for Lucy's score was Things We Left Behind. This book was so good. Like, I didn't really know if it was going to be a repeat of like how the second one was a repeat of the first one, but this was such a juicy book, and I just absolutely loved it. It is following Lucian and Salome, and you kind of get their like backstory of what their kind of like relationship is in the last two books, but this one dives deeper into why they don't like each other in the first two books. And the more you read it and the more you dive into it, the more you're just kind of rooting for them to be together. And by the end of the book, this brought me so much warmth to my heart and made me so happy for these two characters. And I absolutely loved this one. I was rooting for them from the beginning to the end, and it is an amazing love story between two people that are like enemies but become lovers, and I absolutely loved it. And then of course I go back to my girl for my thrillers, Frida McFadden, and we're talking about Ward D. When I tell you that this book made me scared, at the same time I really enjoyed it because you just like don't know where it's going, and I thought it was so good. It follows a medical student named Amy, and she on her shifts has to work in Ward D, which is a locked psychiatric ward. And I'm telling you, it was creepy and scary, and the twists and the turns unfolded, and you learn stuff from her past, and it was an amazing story. Like with these thrillers, I kind of tried to like guess things, but again, I was just so wrong about what I was thinking, and by the end, I'm so relieved like how it ends, because this was a thriller that literally kept me on the edge of my seat chapter after chapter. This is another book where I stayed up so late to read it because it was just so amazing. And then I went back to Colin Hoover and I read Hopeless. Hopeless is a story about a girl named Sky who's homeschooled but then decides to start to go to high school her senior year, and she meets Dean Holder, and their love story is just so intense, and then there's just these secrets that keep unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. And there were so many times I cried during this book because it touches in like such an emotional place and goes into like something that you would never imagine, and it was just such an amazing read, and I was just so like, I just felt so bad for Sky, and again it was so emotional, but I loved the way it ended, and I loved the connection her and Holder have together. And when you first meet Holder, you're like, this guy's intense and he's crazy. And then by the end, you realize that he just really loves her and really cares about her and wants the best for her. And it was just so amazing. And then because we were heading into December, I decided to take a break and kind of go into like Christmas themed books. And I read Meet Me at Christmas by Jenny Hale. And this was such a cute story. It follows Stella Fisher, who is like a journalist and has been traveling, but then goes home to spend Christmas with her mom after their father died. So it's like the first Christmas without her father. So she kind of wants to be there for her mother and, you know, support her. And then she ends up running into her ex, Henry, and Henry is acting weird, and after reading it you discover why he's acting so weird towards her. And for two people that are not likely to have like this connection, they start connecting again, and she kind of starts falling back in love with him but doesn't want to fall in love with him because she wants to pursue her career and still travel. And this was such a cute love story about, you know, running from your past, but then your past kind of coming back and pulling you back in, but in a good way. And I loved it as a Christmas story. It was just so cute. And I was definitely kind of rooting for these two characters because the story was just amazing without giving any spoilers away. You like kind of want her to choose him over her career, and it's just so cute because you kind of think she's gonna go one way and then she doesn't. So definitely a cute little Christmas read. Hey guys, I am popping in real fast because I just realized while editing this that I said the wrong book name. The actual book is The Christmas Fix, and I think when I pulled up the book, I had this one in my library and just for some reason didn't realize that it was the wrong title. So I kind of posted the actual book cover over the Kindle, so please ignore that. And then to end the year, I ended with Lucy Scorn's book of Mr. Fixer-Upper. And this one is a cute story around Christmas time. And it follows Kat King, who is this TV home renovation star. And there is this little town called Mary, Connecticut, who, you know, has a hurricane come through and destroys their whole town. And she wants to put on this like Christmas special series that she kind of goes in and she helps them rebuild their town, because during Christmas time they have like this big Christmas get together and all these people from different towns come, and this year they're not able to do that because of the hurricane. So she really wants to come in and help this town get back on the map so they can have this big Christmas theme. But then she runs into Noah, who is the mayor of this town, who is this like uptight guy who doesn't want her to come in, and she has to like convince him to let her come in and help her change and fix this town around. But he doesn't want her like capitalizing on, you know, the tragedy or making it seem like, oh, sad are we. And these are two people who are almost like enemies into lovers, and I loved it so much because the more you read, you more understand why Noah is the way he is. And you know, it's another kind of story like the last book I read where it's like Kat has to choose between her kind of like her career and the man that she's falling in love with. And I loved the way it ended because this was another one where it's like I never thought it was going to end the way it did, and then when it ended that way, I was just so excited for the characters and for their growth and for the love story that came again from, you know, two people who hated each other to lovers. And it was a great way to end my reading for the end of the year. And I'm so excited because when I first started reading, I never kind of like said this is how many books I'm going to read, and by the end of the year reading 35 books was just really great for me because again, I really love reading and I really wanted to get back into it. Hey guys, wanted to jump in one last time because you're probably confused because I ended with 29 books and I say I read 35, and the reason I say that is because I actually read bonus books of all the Lucy Score books, and they were like continuations of like little short stories of like 5 years from now or 10 years from now off of the books that I had ended. So that's why I say 35, because I actually read those and downloaded those right after I had finished the books. So I just wanted to jump in real quick in case you were confused, because I ended with 29 books, but because I read those little short stories, the Kindle included them as like I read 35 books. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I was just so excited to end the year with reading that many books. And going into 2024, I kind of gave myself a goal of reading 50 books. That's what I want to read by the end of the year. So then I can kind of go back through with you guys and say like which ones I really liked and which ones I really didn't like. And to be honest with you, there really wasn't a book this year that I was like, oh no, I really didn't like that and wouldn't read it again. A lot of the books were in series, which I kind of realized that I kind of like books that kind of are series and, you know, they're like kind of separate on their own, but kind of go with the last books you read. And starting the year off with the series I started off with and then ending with like Christmas themed was just so cute and so nice, and I just absolutely loved, again, diving into reading this year. And if you haven't read any of these books, I definitely recommend reading them. And if you have read some of them, let me know your thoughts on them as well. And also in the comments at the end of today's vlog, comment some books that I didn't list that you've read that you think I would like to read, because I would like to have more recommendations of what other people are reading and what you think that you like, that you might think that I like. Like I said, I kind of started into like fantasy and supernatural, and then I kind of was going into romance, and then I was going into self-help, and then after self-help I kind of just got into thrillers, and then I was kind of going back and forth from like romance to thrillers, but would really like to kind of read more maybe supernatural books this year. I also want to dive into more Colleen Hoover books because I really enjoyed her stories and just enjoy her writing. And also Lucy Score, I really love her writing and her books as well. Also Frida McFadden thrillers are just so amazing, so I'm going to dive more into her books this year. But I hope you enjoyed the book chat with me today. Again, in the comments, let me know if you've read the same ones as me. Let me know any recommendations that you think of books that you've read that I didn't name that you think I would like. And I am just so excited for my reading journey in 2024 and to see where it takes me. So thanks for letting me chat with you about books today, and I will talk to you guys again real soon in the next vlog. Bye.